If judges would please introduce themselves.
Hello,
Right.
I'm
Go ahead,
Miriam
Miriam.
Marsadegi. I am delighted to be with you. I participated in We the People the first year that it was offered, long time ago, on the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution. I serve on the board of the Center for Civic Education, and I've devoted a lot of my career to providing civic education to people living in the Middle East, and particularly Iran, where I'm originally from.
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. Michael DePiro. I work for the state of Florida in Tallahassee, Florida, for the Florida Department of Education. Just trying to see how many times I could slip Florida into the same sentence. All right, Tandy.
And good morning. My name is Tandy McConnell. I spent about 20 years as a professor of history at Columbia College in South Carolina. And then a few years ago, I decided to do something really challenging and became a high school history teacher, which is what I'm doing right now. It's a lot of fun, but I've been doing We the People for quite a few years, and it is the highlight of my year. So I'm delighted to be here with you guys and looking forward to our conversation about the Constitution.
Okay, could you introduce yourselves, please, and your teachers?
Hi, my name is Lily Jameson, and I'm also very excited to have this conversation today.
Hello, my name is Jack Clark, and this should hopefully be a lot of fun.
Hello, my name is Jen Riley, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Abby. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to have this conversation with us.
Hi, I'm Kieran Larkin, and these are our teachers, Mr. Conway and Mr. Van Valkenburg.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you, Miriam.
Good to see you. Okay, all right. I am going to read the question for us all. We are Unit 1, Philosophical Historical Foundations of the American Political System. Our question today is the second one. Parliament passed the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679. What is habeas corpus, and to what extent, if any, is it essential to the principle of limited government? How has the writ of habeas corpus evolved in the United States? Under what circumstances, if any, might the writ of habeas corpus place an unreasonable burden on the government? Please begin.
William Blackstone stated, "To bereave a man of life or by violence to confiscate his estate without accusation or trial would be so gross and notorious an act of despotism and therefore a more dangerous engine of arbitrary government."
The concept of habeas corpus, a person's right to know why they are being imprisoned, is an essential principle of limited government. It ensures protection against tyrannical expanses of power. Its foundations were first established in the Magna Carta through the principles of due process and codified in the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679, establishing the writ filed by detainees.
This principle continued in the colonies after the horrors of King George's Vice Admiralty Courts, and it was established by statute in the Judiciary Act of 1789, as well as establishing the conditions for suspension in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. Hamilton referred to habeas corpus as perhaps greater securities to liberty and republicanism than any the Constitution contains in Federalist 84.
This natural right was furthermore established in 5 state constitutions and protected without the allowance for suspension by North Carolina. In 1807, the Supreme Court established its essential authority to issue the writ in the case of ex parte Bowman, and this essential protection against federal expansive power seemed nearly untouchable. Yet over time, it has been whittled away through the seemingly never-ending expansion of the executive branch.
This newly introduced constitutional right would be heavily tested during the Civil War, when President Lincoln not only ignored but fully suspended the writ of habeas corpus throughout the Union. Judicial action was taken against him in ex parte Merryman. However, Lincoln used Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution that states that this writ can be suspended in cases of rebellion or invasion, or if the public safety may require it, as justification for ignoring Justice Taney's ruling. Although this may have been beneficial and necessary to win the war, it validated the notion that the judicial rights of U.S. citizens could be ignored.
During the Reconstruction following the Civil War, the Habeas Corpus Act of 1867 was passed so that the newly freed slaves would now have the same judicial rights as every other American citizen. This right, however, would be further violated during World War II, when Executive Order 9066, passed in 1942, made Japanese internment camps legal, removed their right to the writ of habeas corpus, and denied their overall rights supposedly protected by the Fifth Amendment.
In 1996, Congress passed the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which greatly narrows the grounds on which successful habeas claims can be made, only allowing claims to succeed when the convictions were contrary to clearly established federal law or an unreasonable determination of the facts in light of the evidence. The AEDPA excessively limits habeas corpus within the United States for criminal offenses as a part of the 1990s war on crime.
On September 11, 2001, heinous terrorist attacks brought us Bush's War on Terror, an era that continues to affect politics today. While national safety is of utmost importance, the elimination of terrorism is no simple task and likely an impossible one.
However, the tracking down and eradicating of foreign threats to public safety requires sacrifices. Arguably, the grossest abuse of habeas suspension is evident in the military detention camp at Guantanamo Bay. Throughout the War on Terror, the CIA and executive branch administrations have utilized this detention camp to hold foreign nationals and suspected terrorists for extended periods of time with little to no rights.
These men and women aren't granted habeas rights, and in cases such as Mohammed el-Slahi, they can be held for upwards of 10 years with no charges brought against them. Moreover, in times when the courts do intervene, the executive branch fails to obey those decisions and prolongs torture and imprisonment.
The government continually attempts to narrow the scope of habeas, as seen in the proposal of the Military Commissions Act of 2006, which stripped non-citizens who were accused of being an enemy combatant of their right to be heard in court to establish innocence, a notion that was denied in Hamdan v. Rumsfeld.
Referring to the conditions in which the great event may be suspended, it would appear there are circumstances in which the Constitution deems habeas corpus an unreasonable burden on the government. However, the right of habeas corpus is never an unnecessary burden, but rather a necessary responsibility. Although the suspension of habeas corpus has been useful at times in history, the notion that it is optional is a dangerously slippery slope.
Thank you. You ended almost exactly on time, just 1 second to go. All right, I'm going to ask you a question about the relevance of habeas corpus and due process protections when it comes to America's standing in the world. Do you think it makes us a stronger country because we have them? Think about the fact that China is really our lead adversary in the world, and it's a system of government in which the people do not have these protections. Do you think that we are stronger because we do? And if so, exactly why?
I would say without a doubt, this serves as a very important foundation in the idea of natural rights philosophy within America in particular, and it provides a check against unreasonable versions of government or in turn corrupt versions of government. For example, in the South from the 1950s and 60s, the right to habeas corpus was a way in which we could combat some of these racially biased state courts that were trying to charge African Americans unequally as compared to people compared to white people. And this provides a way in which we can check against the government, specifically state courts in this example, so they're not able to overturn and over control specific areas.
I think it absolutely is incredibly important, and it really does set us aside from some of these other countries because it really ties into this idea of due process. You know, part of the reason why the 5th and 14th Amendments are so important to today is their due process clauses, right? And in order for a person to truly and fully be able to present themselves to court and put up a good defense and to not sort of have to be able to sort of put up a good defense is to be able to know what you're in trial for. You can't put up a good defense if you don't know what you're defending yourself against.
Okay. But as a country, the entirety, you know, not the individual, of course, that's very important to any individual to have their rights. But as a country, do we have comparative advantages because of these protections? When you compare to other countries, what are the advantages that the United States has? If you think that it does have advantages, what are those advantages?
I would say this gets back to the very important ideal of democracy, the idea of popular consent. This is a way in which we as a people are able to express kind of how we're feeling towards the government and in a way give the government permission. If we feel as though we are not being treated equally, specifically in the courts, in the judicial branch of our country, and we feel that we are not necessarily being treated equally. You see this in cases such as Mohammed el-Slahi versus the United States, in Mohammed el-Slahi versus Obama, when caught on Guantanamo Bay. If we feel that we are not being treated equally as a country, we are able to kind of use this as a way in the courts to kind of question unreasonable treatment. We are also able to use this as a way to kind of uphold the important ideals of natural right philosophy within our country, the ideas of that Locke first discussed, the idea of pursuit of happiness and liberty, and that was kind of ideal.
Although it certainly presents challenges in military actions when we can't just detain whomever we choose with no restrictions, it does make us stronger as a nation because it helps us preserve our nation and prevent us from tyranny. That's something talked about in Federalist 84 is how important habeas corpus is to the protection from tyranny and the security of liberty.
So it creates some resilience as a country, right? What about financially, economically, trade, innovation, ingenuity? Having these protections of our basic rights, does that help?
This
Is the question for me?
How does it help the United States economically in terms of competitiveness in the world and business and enterprise within our borders? Does it help to have these protections?
Absolutely, because I think when we talk about the idea of immigration, we are going to get more people who feel as though they are being treated as a person, as a sort of employee unfairly and as a citizen of their country, and they're going to come to the United States. And I think that not only gives us an advantage economically, just sort of treating our citizens as just citizens of the United States, but I think additionally the idea of as world powers such as the United Kingdom, such as Ireland, are going to want to, Canada, are going to want to work with us economically. You know, so we sort of have the idea in the United States where we don't wish to, you know, we have more restrictions on doing economic trade with China because we don't feel as though they treat their employees and their citizens correctly. So when we look at the example of being a first world country, and that's not quite a politically correct term, but as a world power, we can work with other world powers because they think that we are a moral companion.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that it promotes free thought, the ability that you're not going to be thrown into jail by your government. And you have the ability to contest that detainment and see whether or not it was lawful, promotes the free thought and the forward thinking of the members of our society. Americans are able to have their own free thoughts. They're able to speak out against their government through their First Amendment rights, and they're able to really promote what they think. And that promotion of forward thinking within our government is really going to push us forward in technology and see us progress and see us become that industrial power that's going to make us competitive with the rest of the world.
Colleagues, more questions?
Yeah, I'll jump in since you mentioned about free thought and in a modern context. Constitutionally speaking, what modern situations might we see the government be justified in suspending habeas corpus?
The obvious example that we've seen, especially in the 21st century, is the idea of the war on terror. Is the idea that Bush first announced this kind of war on terror as a time in which, especially looking at Guantanamo Bay, we might in some cases have to suspend the writ of habeas corpus in order to prevent something from happening. It's a ticking time bomb scenario in which if we feel as though a person is going to be responsible for a terrorist attack or a bombing, that there might be some cases in which we have to sacrifice a little bit of our morals in order to do what is best for the greater good, this common good ideal.
So let me give you a specific example then, because that's a very specific example that's occurred that you could link to. 1 minute. I'm just going to throw out here. Would the government have been justified in suspending habeas corpus for either the Black Lives Matter resulting riots or the June 6th riots that happened? In either situation, I'm trying to give you a broad.
January 6th.
Oh, January 6th.
When it comes to especially looking more towards the January 6th type of attack on the US Capitol, that's very different in my mind to looking at the kind of Black Lives Matter movements as protests, as this was a specific attack and a very volatile attack against a government building that serves as something different than the idea of people protesting for their own rights. So I think in this case, you're looking at kind of the motive behind why they'd be suspending it and the people that are going to be and resulting possibly going to prison, where you have the people in January 6th where they're not necessarily trying to get their own rights, they're trying to use this as a way in order to attack and bring down another part of the population of the United States, whereas you have the Black Lives Matter movements, they are protesting in order to get equal rights, and that connects back to the idea of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, where the government sometimes was able to kind of suspend these rights in order to get these people in prison, and that's why we saw there heavy pushback from organizations such as the ACLU in order to that we had.
Thanks, Jack. Yep. But your point is well taken. didn't feel like you want to cut you off, but we hit time, but we got it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Such a pleasure to listen to you guys. Really. It's a real pleasure. You guys traversed very effortlessly. And you had this agility, finesse, ability to, you know, go to the law, go to history, go to contemporary cases, current tensions. I could see you thinking on your feet, particularly. I was tuned into you more with my question, but really all around. You have a passion for the material that comes through. Lily, I really liked your ability to bring it to the idea of, you know, when as a society, as an entire society, and then also as an individual, we know that we have the basic rights protected, we're much more likely to take risks in the free market, to really innovate technologically. And, you know, yes, all this stuff, all this we the people stuff matters for its own sake, for natural rights and all of that. But when you come down to the level of the human being, you want to have your rights so you can do things, so you can pursue the things that really matter to you. I'm sure each of you has certain subjects in school that matter more to you than others. You imagine yourself doing something in the future you have a passion for. That's possible because we have our freedoms. You know, we don't want to be free for the sake of being free only. We are free, and therefore we can act in the world. We can marry who we want. We can raise our children the way we want. We can read what we want. We can go out into the work world and do the things that matter to us. And these are things that we take for granted, but there's a huge percentage of the population in the world that just doesn't have these things. And so it was important. You guys did a lot of hard work. I congratulate you for that. And I'm grateful to your teachers too.
That's a great job. Wonderful presentation. You brought things, you moved historically, Magna Carta, thinking about the Vice Admiralty courts as being one of the propelling factors in making the founders of the framers of the Constitution think about, wait a minute, we lost that right of habeas corpus shortly before the revolution. We want to make sure we don't lose that again, so it's enshrined not just in law but in the Constitution.
So yeah, my little terror joined me, but the depth of your answers is reflected in we weren't able to answer or ask as many questions as we have kind of scripted out and planned. So I think that's a very good thing in the regard to how you are able to respond to what we asked. And it was a very interesting take on habeas corpus. I think it was Lily saying, well, this is protecting our freedom of speech and making that connection, because I think at the heart of Miriam's question is in China, you don't have that protection, and knowing that you could petition your arrest is so powerful to protecting that First Amendment right. And then one last piece, Jack, I tried giving you, well, everybody, a little range with either the Black Lives Matter incident, because New York City had recently suspended habeas corpus, so that was appropriate there. And then as well as the January 6th, I apologize, I hope I'm not predicting the future on anything, the January 6th, because in both instances, people look at them through different lenses, and the government didn't feel it justified to suspend habeas corpus for the most part across the board. It did in the one instance. So I would have loved to talk to you a little bit more about that, but it has no effect on like scoring. It's just a lack of time. So I appreciate y'all.